Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the show. We are Wednesday afternoon live, coming in from London, and it's Christine Hart with a special guest, Brian Barrett, who is going to educate us on all things spiritual. We are going to go into Blavatsky, the reason why there's a lot of discord in the world at the moment, and perhaps starting off with Lucifer, who we talked about in the part one of the show. Hi, Brian, how are you?
Yeah, hi. No pressure. Gonna religiously enlighten you. Okay, no problem. I'll have to rise to the challenge, as they say.
That's good. So I wanted to start on Lucifer. That you told me that last time we spoke that I had said, oh, it was a good gig to be Luciferian. Can you just refresh my memory in what Luciferian means?
Well, essentially, Luciferian is going to the light. He's an angel of light. He didn't start off as an angel of light. He was a normal angel, so to speak. And somewhere
Called
along
Samael. Called Samael, apparently.
Yeah, Samael. What happened was him and his mates decided, let's have a bit of a revolution. And from there, we've obviously got the mythos of Lucifer is in fact a Chinese invention and probably a Roman invention as well. But realistically, you can look at the Chinese records. I believe that China was the first to mention Lucifer, which is quite interesting. But the whole thing about Lucifer, of course, is the enlightenment of the self. It's not necessarily the enlightenment of the world or the person next to you. As long as you find enlightenment, then you're okay. I would imagine, if we look at this from a purely philosophical viewpoint, if only you are enlightened, then really what's the point? If we look at this, anybody who is enlightened is usually killed, aren't they?
Are they?
Well, yeah. I mean, think of a few people. Let's start off with the famous one, Jesus Christ. He was allegedly enlightened, so he got crucified, or allegedly was crucified, but you must remember that his crucifixion didn't appear in the Christian narrative until 700 years later. The Ethiopian Bibles don't mention anything about him being crucified, and they were in fact the first Bible. And also, they just recently found a copy of St. Barnabas, and he wrote something on Jesus Christ, and he does not mention the crucifixion either. Ironically, neither does Paul. So, so whether or not the crucifixion happened in the way they say it happened is a moot point, really. And I think the fact it was added 700 years later says everything. This is the whole thing about the Luciferian argument. It's about the enlightenment of the individual, and then if we take this sort of like further to sort of people who really changed the world, I would imagine we're probably looking at Gandhi. I would have thought Gandhi, and then round about that time you're looking at Jiddu Maruti, you're looking at Steiner, you're looking at Gurdjieff, and you're looking at Blavatsky. Now Blavatsky is a prominent figure, even to this day, in the Theosophical movement. However, she had a very complex life, and that's something to really take into consideration. Many people don't know that part of her experiences and interests included painting, music, and some really controversial habits. Can you imagine what those controversial habits were?
Smoking opium?
And cannabis.
Right.
And even to her death, she was allegedly smoking up to 100 cigarettes a day. If you read her work is fantastic. For example, The Secret Doctrine, is probably one of the best works on the occult that you could ever read. But allegedly it came from the book of what she called the Book of Dan San. Very few people, if any, have seen this book. Manly P. Hall said he saw it, but you've got to understand that Manly P. Hall was very connected to the Freemasons, and so was Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. Why is this relevant? Because essentially a lot of law suggests that the Freemasons are Luciferian, and she had access to her grandfather's library. Now, her grandfather was a member of royalty, and he also had an absolutely exclusive occultic library. And when she was a girl, she literally spent all her time in the library reading the occult and Masonic literature. From that, she claimed to have enough knowledge to engage in something called the mystical brotherhood. And she swore that her experiences with cannabis were not merely recreational, and she considered it as part of her religious practice. Cannabis and sort of Sufism pretty much go hand in hand. I don't know if you know that, but essentially in some of not all of the Sufi sects, but a lot of them, part of their rite of passage is to meet the guardian angel or to meet the Hadam, and they close themselves in a almost hermetically sealed area. They eat a special diet, but part of the incense that they burn is, of course, cannabis. So they're inhaling the cannabis, which helps them connect to the higher levels of consciousness. But once again, what we're talking about here is individual enlightenment. And realistically, anything that is individual and doesn't really care about what me and you do, by its very nature, Luciferian. So this is something that you've really got to come in mind. Going back to what you say, why isn't everybody into the Luciferian gig? Well, a lot of people are into the Luciferian gig. You've only got to go on Facebook and you sort of see, oh, I don't hang around with toxic people. I mean, that's a really wonderful thing to say, but have you ever thought about what that actually means? I don't hang around with toxic people. Have you ever thought about that?
No, what does it mean? No.
It means that you're immeasurably better than the person that you think is toxic.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, sort of, so I mean, what type of enlightenment is it if you think that you are actually better than everybody else? There's that old joke, I'm really balanced now and I'm enlightened and I'm much better than everybody else. That's your trouble with any form of Luciferian discipline, is that it's all inward looking, it's all to do with chasing the light, and it's all to do with the development of one's inner powers. If you're dealing with one's inner power and you're not interested in the world, then what are you solely interested in? I would imagine that it's a very fine line between getting religious enlightenment or spiritual enlightenment in you want, or being the most holier than thou in the room. What do you think, Chris?
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
I mean, you see it on Facebook all the time, or even on X, or whatever it wants to call itself at the moment. And I think, going back to the original opening, I think that is your problem with any Luciferic discipline is the fact that it's really easy to consider yourself the king or queen of enlightenment. And in reality, that's, in my opinion, not what enlightenment is about. Enlightenment is you helping me helping you, and we work together to gain, if you like, a spiritual overview or what is called enlightenment. Not necessarily me sat there in my kaftan, as you once told me, saying, Chris, you're useless. Come on, you've got to be as enlightened as me. If you're not, well, what are you? I mean, sort of, you would just think, what a prick. Surely, that's what you would think. So this is what you have to remember when you're dealing with people like Blavatsky. I mean, yes, she was really artistic. Yes, she managed to, like most Luciferians, tie in her artistic ability with her ability to understand that she was enlightened. So when she's painted well, it wasn't, oh, I've been practicing and I'm pretty good. It's, no, I can contact the higher levels of consciousness and that allows me to paint well. And it was the same with her piano playing as well, that she used the hermetic philosophy to fuel the passion of her occult by proving I can play piano better than you, while ignoring the fact that, you know, she'd been trained at an early age to play the piano. I'm not saying that she wasn't enlightened, but I'm just saying it would, you know, she when you read her biographies, it's fairly obvious that she would pull this into her philosophy. I mean, how she could say that smoking 200 cigarettes a day, which apparently was quite usual for public figures at that time, but not necessarily women, but how she could say that was part of her ability to be enlightened and be a spiritual leader, I've got no idea. I mean, seriously, if you met somebody who drank like a fish, that was another thing. She used to like her vodka, and she smoked 200 cigarettes a day. She wasn't married, by the way.
What about her journeys to Shambhala? I think there's a book called The Lost City or something like that.
Well, it all depends who you believe. This is where it gets really complicated, because there isn't that much evidence to say that she went to Tibet. She did go to India, and there are people who say that she went to Tibet, and there are sort of Tibetan lamas who said that they met her. However, real hard evidence is lacking. Now, there is another really interesting reason why the hard evidence may be lacking, because it's just come out recently that Helena also worked for the British Secret Service. Was that part of her enlightenment? I don't know. But, you know, you would presume that if you were an enlightened being, that you wouldn't want to get involved in the murky world of spying and politics. Perhaps that's me. Perhaps I'm not enlightened enough. I don't know. There's something lacking in you if you're allegedly supposed to be enlightened, but the next moment you're spying for the British. I don't know what you think. What do you think as an ace reporter?
Perhaps she was a patriot.
Well, she was Russian, so I don't know where the patriotism comes from. She was working for the British.
Russia, maybe.
I don't know. I find it quite amusing. I mean, as a reporter, and if you had the opportunity to interview Blavatsky, and you'd say, well, Helena, what part of your enlightenment is it to spy? That would be your question, would it not? Or one of them.
Spies, you know, I worked as a spy, as you know. I don't think they're always bad. I don't think they're always mercenary. Sometimes they can take the high moral ground. I don't think spying necessarily is always wrong.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that it's wrong or right. I'm not there. I'm not there to judge. But what I am questioning is the fact that this enlightened being found it part of enlightenment journey to work for a covert British spy network. Spying and the royal family have gone hand in hand since John Dee, so it doesn't come as a surprise. But John Dee never promised to be enlightened.
In her book, I think it's called The Lost City, something like that. Did she write about these underground places in Tibet?
She did mention about all this, and this is where it gets really sinister, because do you know somebody who loved her work?
Hitler.
Hitler really jumped on the Aryan thing and the Tibet thing. I'm not sure about her writing in depth about Shambhala, but Shambhala, this is really interesting. Shambhala is supposed to be under Mount Kailash. Did you know that?
Yes.
Yeah, and to this day, nobody has ever scaled Mount Kailash. A group of, this is really interesting, a group of Siberian mountaineers got halfway up Mount Kailash, and they had to come down because they were aging, literally getting older. And then when they came down, they were something like 10 or 20 years older than when they started. And the following year, they all died of old age after scaling.
Yeah,
After scaling Mount Kailash. That's irrefutable. That's what happened. So
some people believe, such as Douglas Dietrich, that the Nazis now live in the Unterland, which is a subterranean Shambhala, out of body, of course. So what do you think about that?
Amazing claims need amazing evidence, don't they? If you are an experienced astral traveler, then you understand that there are many realms within the astral world that are quite simply bizarre. You know, they really are bizarre. In the Kabbalah, it's described as Yesod, the realm of illusion. Now, I would imagine that it would be possible that if you were not disciplined to go into the realm of illusion, and really you could just encounter anything you wanted, because essentially that realm will provide it. Whether or not it's real, that's another question. But the really interesting thing is, what happens when a no-nonsense engineer learns how to astral travel? Now, that did happen. A guy called Burt Monroe, he learned to astral travel, and then he built the system called the Hemisync Gateway system from it. And he worked with the CIA and FBI and all these people, and they explored these different realms of consciousness. And in it, Burt Monroe talks about meeting people on the astral that led him to other paths of enlightenment. So,
Yeah, I've read both his books quite a few years ago. Robert Monroe, Journeys Out of the Body.
Robert Monroe, yeah. Well, you've got to remember that he was a no-nonsense engineer. I saw an interview with somebody who worked with him, and he worked with the FBI and the CIA purely because they would put up the money. He wasn't political, but he was, he wanted to be able to spend as much as possible on it. And when he discovered his ability to go into the astral realms, they found all sorts of things, which remote viewing, etc., etc. They found that there were like Soviet guards guarding installations. Who knows? Perhaps there is an elite Nazi unit of astral travelers still on that realm of consciousness. I don't know. I've never met any.
Course, I know they were doing opening portals in Velversberg Castle. Michael Aquino went there to do a ritual, and also Russ Dizdar, who ended up dead, went there to try and close the portal. But rumor had it that Himmler was opening up and Lucifer was coming through, or as they say, the tall whites. And it's interesting that Edward Snowden, when he leaked those papers, he said that that Iran believed that America was under control by the tall whites.
I saw a documentary on YouTube, I sent it to you, which essentially blows the lid on it. And, it's saying that the UFOs are not UFOs, they're interdimensional beings. And essentially, they all fall very neatly into satanic / Luciferian entities.
Yes.
So there's that old adage, isn't there? That there's no smoke without fire, because it's not just one group of people saying this now. It's like several groups of people. The fact that unrelated people are talking about this phenomena must mean that there is a phenomenon. Yeah? But what it is, I don't know. I mean, whenever I've been on the astral, I never met sort of high-ranking Nazi officers or white aliens or grey aliens or stuff like this. However, the really interesting drug, I forget the name, it was really popular in the 90s. And when anybody took this drug, they always met the grey aliens. And it didn't matter what your background or what your religious belief was, they just met the grey aliens. Is the grey aliens a kind of Jungian dark reflection of ourselves? That's the other thing you've got to ask yourself. That we project this fear, and this fear comes out looking a little bit like a grey alien.
I'm not sure about that. I'm pretty sure the Greys are real, and they're probably a slave class for the reptilians.
Yeah, I mean that's the interesting thing about the reptilians, isn't it? If you take away the UFO belief from it, they certainly fall into how most people understand demons. The wings, the tail, and the reptoid look. Are they UFO entities or not? I don't know. Are they extra dimensional beings? I don't know. Touch wood, I've been lucky enough not to meet them. And I hope it stays that way.
Well, I felt I was pulled out of my body that time by Michael Aquino when I interacted with him. And then on the third time he did that, he did it on 3 consecutive days, there were greys with him, which was quite interesting. And they say that the American military works with the greys.
In that documentary, it goes right back to Eisenhower. Apparently, Eisenhower did a deal with them. So, but once again, it's sort of like, extraordinary claims need really amazing evidence. But once again, it's sort of like, is it just some wonderful myth that's just knocking about just to keep people distracted? I
don't think so. I mean, there's been too much written about them. There's some really good stuff by Whitley Strieber. He had that movie, Communion. And of course, Stephen Greer writes really good stuff. And there's a lot of senior military that have come out that talk about the captured reptilians and the alien bases that he's asking for disclosure now, which I think is just a matter of time. I met Stephen in London. I went along to his little show he had there. But interestingly, the night before, I was looking out my window and it was 2 a.m. Couldn't get to sleep. And I saw like a lace covering over the moon. And I thought, that looks odd. So I started to look closer and then it started to move. And I followed them out the window and they were like golden orbs. I ended up going out in the garden and actually filming them, and there was these orbs, over the house, and it was totally amazing. And I started saying, "Holy shit, this is amazing!" And I did a little recording, and I passed it to the local paper, and they said, "Oh, a few people have seen them, and that's the local rugby ground." Now, being a journalist, I rang the local rugby ground, and they weren't messing about with lights, and they don't have lights that look like orbs. And the interesting thing about them, they totally disappeared. You could be watching them, they'd move up and down, and then they'd just disappear really, really fast.
But the other side of the coin is that when jinn come through to our dimension, they often take the shape of orbs.
Oh, do they?
Yeah. I'll send you a picture. I've got a friend who's really high into jinn magic, and he has a genie bottle. And in the genie bottle, there he took a picture of his genie, which is a kind of a purple orb, which is really interesting. I would imagine that probably saw some kind of jinn orb, I would have thought. Because, I mean, you've had contact with the jinn, and
yes,
quite simply, they never go away. So,
I really?
Yeah, of course they don't. They don't. They never go away. And this is another reason why a lot of investigators into the occult, like William Cooper, you must know William Cooper, yeah, from America. He started digging into what really were the so-called UFOs. And he came out with the conclusion they were actually interdimensional beings. And he was killed pretty much after saying that. That was, late 80s, early 90s. Do you know him, William Cooper? Chris?
Yes, I've read stuff and watched the videos.
Yeah. Like I said, he got killed for saying that these were interdimensional beings. So
interesting.
Yeah, so you pay your money, you take your choice. The other thing as well is there is a big paper trail. There's a massive paper trail. If we go to Burt Monroe, why is the FBI and CIA really interested in contacting interdimensional beings? The Montauk Project, all these kind of things. that there is a paper trail that somebody somewhere either knows or has enough inclination that these beings are actually real. I mean, what do you think? I mean, because, it's not just a question of, oh, I think I'll get a few 100 million and we'll see if we can contact a few little aliens. You have to obviously put your proposal, and part of your proposal, you've got to have reasonably solid, information from credible witnesses before they'll give you the money to do that type of investigation. So that
I think that they are the entities of old. I mean, because when we think of angels, when we think of demons, we do it through the eyes of biblical readings and, I suppose, Christmas cards and all that guff. But actually, they're probably super advanced and futuristic, and probably don't have a solid form, and probably we only see them through our little mouse like eyes, so we probably can't even see them. So they probably are the angels and demons of old. So I think us wondering whether they are angels and demons or extraterrestrials is probably a moot point.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult to put your money on it because, like I said, everybody wants hard evidence. To be fair, like Stephen Greer will produce videos of stuff happening and things like that. But you've got to remember that in today's world, with the various AIs and stuff like that, and the wonderful computer graphics, you can pretty much knock out anything that you want. And if you're in it for the money, well, you don't mind spending a few $100,000 for a very, very convincing video.
Oh yeah, of course.
This is the problem with this world. We can listen to travelers, we can listen to people who talk about their own experience, but that only washes so much. At the end of the day, you want hard, concrete evidence that people can say, yeah, this looks like it's pretty much what you're saying it is. And unfortunately, with the entire UFO and occult community, it's very difficult to find that kind of hard evidence, And unfortunately now, like I said, with the advent of AI and the supercomputing editing things, it's even more difficult to understand what's a hoax and what's real. And if you imagine, we're in the 21st century now, and we're still having big problems deciding what is real. When Blavatsky was talking to the ascended masters and going to Shambhala allegedly and talking about this, it was even more difficult to prove. And at the end of the day, you either have to take what she's saying with a pinch of salt. You're either going to have to sort of try and find corroborative evidence, and even with the corroborative evidence, is it the guy who's selling her books that's saying this? You're really on your back foot with all this. I mean, I would say that Blavatsky at some stage in her career was fairly talented when it came to alchemy, Hermetic philosophy, and and all the works, but then there's this really massive contradiction. If you read the early Blavatsky stuff, she's absolutely anti-spiritualism. However, it didn't take her long to start making big money from the spiritualism. Alarm bells have got to ring. Hello, Ellen, you're telling us that the whole spiritual thing's a farce, and next minute you're doing the spiritual, the spiritualism. And now, this is where it gets really, really interesting. Have you heard of mesmerism?
Hypnotism?
Yeah, but mesmerism, not hypnotism. Mesmerism.
No.
Well, Mesmer was, he was around the same time as Mozart. Now, here's something really interesting for you. Mesmer was Mozart's godfather. Yeah?
Oh, interesting.
So did he use mesmerism to make Mozart even better than what he was? Now, if you look at all these guys, I'm not sure about Steiner, but Gurdjieff, Blavatsky, Crowley, they were all experts in mesmerism, i.e. they could hypnotize an entire audience. And Blavatsky actually talks about this, boasts that hypnotize an entire audience, and it didn't really matter how many it was, she could still do it. So how much of this was the audience being taken into an awakened form of hypnotism? Remember, this is before videos, this is before radio, this is, if you've got somebody with charisma and somebody who's traveled the world and somebody who can do some fairly amazing sleight of hand, you're probably going to buy into what she's going to say. And if on top of that, she's using mesmerism as well, you're probably going to buy into it hook, line, and sinker, I would have thought. I'm not saying that she's a fake, but all I'm saying is she certainly had the tools.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I don't know what you think. It's been some really famous hypnotists. Who is it? Darren Brown. Darren Brown can take the audience and he can make people stand up in the audience and tell them things, and they'd say, yeah, that's exactly it, Darren. That's what I wanted to know. That's what I wanted to say. And then he says to them, I actually used hypnotism on you. And this is in the 21st century. So we have to be very careful when we're looking at anything, because if Blavatsky could use mesmerism that well in the sort of like late 1800s, imagine how well it can be used now.
Oh, that's the thought, yes.
How much more advanced is it than we could ever imagine? It's a really,
yes.
I think it's a really interesting question, because, you've only got to see Darren Brown to understand how powerful this kind of suggestion can be. And
yeah. Do you think he works with entities? I mean, he does mind reading and that. I mean,
I just think he's absolutely brilliant at mesmerism. I really do. To the point where the entire audience is sucked in by him. A little bit like Blavatsky.
What about the mind reading? He does that too. Is that just psychometry? I'm guessing.
Well, I mean, you can watch that thing, Fool Us on Penn and Teller, and they have people who do mind reading, and I always wondered how they do it, because they're so brilliant and so accurate. But the fact that people can do it as a trick means that there is some kind of technique that can guarantee somebody answering in a way that you want to answer, because there are so many people doing this type of work. It's not just one or two people. And if you can have people who openly can say, look, this is a mind reading trick, then there is a formula which they use. And if there is a formula that they use, then essentially it's probably not that mysterious. It's probably amazingly skillful, but it's probably not that mysterious. What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, exactly. Yeah, I don't think it would be that mysterious. I've noticed there's not a lot of books on how to hypnotize online. In fact, I can't think of one book on how to hypnotize or use the scripts.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can buy old books on mesmerism. Now, the interesting thing about mesmerism is it was really, really popular, and they used it to heal people. And of course, the medical society didn't like that. Okay, not when you can sell them pills. You don't want to be giving them hypnotism. So mesmerism per se became very, if you like, marred in charlatanism. However, into like the late 60s, it re-emerged as hypnotism and psychological hypnotism. And, you can see your psychologists, you can see your counselors, and many of them use some kind of hypnotism to, help the person have an internal dialogue. So, I think the fact you don't read so much on, hypnotize your wife, get her to do the washing every night. The reason why you don't read that is because they're desperately trying to make something which they have called dubious. Yeah, the authorities have called dubious for hundreds of years, suddenly have some kind of academic credibility. Weird. In my opinion. I know a lot of clinical hypnotists, and it's certainly part of psychological treatments that they give people. But like I said, it comes from mesmerism, and mesmerism has always been classed as showground, charlatan, blah, blah, blah. So maybe this is why you don't read so much online, because quite simply, they're trying to clean it up. How much confidence would you have in being hypnotized, understanding that all through the 18th and 19th century, they said that mesmerism was nothing more than just a sideshow gambit?
Yes, I remember reading that.
What do you think to the whole hypnotism thing? Do you think it's actually credibility, or do you think it's...
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been hypnotized to go back to childhood, and I felt myself in the playground. I remembered I started laughing, and the hypnotist said to me, "Why are you laughing?" And I said, "I can see Dean Grover's Willie." And I actually remembered he was sitting cross-legged playing marbles, and all the girls were like, "We can see his Willie." And we formed a line to look up the side of his little short trousers to see his Willie. And I hadn't remembered that. It was quite interesting. And she took me down the ages. And then she said, at one point I started crying. And sadly, she was one of those people that if people have strong reactions, they don't like it. And I was crying. She said, "I'm not going to hypnotize you anymore because you have a strong reaction." I disagreed with that. But that was the last time I was hypnotized. But it definitely does work. I was thinking of...
But hold on. So I'm going to be devil's advocate here. Yeah?
Yes.
All right. You're put into a state of hypnosis and you relive a sensation in a period of time. Okay. I'm not disputing that on any level. But therapeutically, did it make you a better person?
No, not at all. I mean, no.
So,
no.
Okay. Being cynical, what was the point?
God knows. Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, because I mean, let's look at this from a very callous way. You've dealt with this. You've dealt with this period of time. You've come through it. Hopefully, it's made you a better person, a better, stronger person. Then this person takes you to a place where you are fragile and brittle, and you're reliving it again.
But I wasn't really fragile and brittle. I mean, I was actually laughing.
Yeah, but you said you then ended up crying, and that would indicate that
yeah, it was just a point. We went back to me being small in my parents' house. Yeah. I mean, I think she was just trying it out on me. I don't think she was trying to get any result, really, to be honest.
Yeah, well, then I don't really understand why it was done to you, because from what I understand, the root of mesmerism, hypnotism, whatever you want to call it, is to take the person into a place where you can advise them how to deal with that situation to make themselves a better person. And I know there are professional hypnotists who do this, but a lot of the people, when they go back into this state of fragility, it takes them an awful long while, because essentially it kindles all the things that made them insecure as an adult. I think that's my objection to hypnotism per se, that if the hypnotist is not skilled and there isn't a point to what they're doing, then realistically it's some kind of sadomasochism, because they're taking their client or victim or whatever you want to use, and they're putting them in a place where, oh my God, they're at the worst.
Yeah.
And if they come out of it and they're still in the worst state of mind, how does that help them?
Well, I think the idea is to get trauma out. I think something like primal therapy is good for because we store trauma in the body. So therapy, it's always good if we just get to the trauma,
Yeah, I agree with you. But like I said, it's with all mind experiments is that the human mind is absolutely garbage at remembering.
Yeah.
If you understood how bad the human mind is at remembering, you would never ask a first-hand witness, because there really is no point. They just don't remember. And not only do they not remember, they're also super unobservant. I mean, have you seen the video, The Gorilla in the Room?
What is it, a movie?
It's a very short film where they show people dancing. And literally, while the people are dancing, a guy in a gorilla suit runs through all the dancers. And about something like 70-80% of the people do not see the gorilla until the second time when they're being told there's a gorilla in the room.
No, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, you can find it on YouTube. Find it. It's really fascinating. I mean, I've spoiled it for you because you'll now look for the gorilla. But literally, when people watch it for the first time, and this is the thing as being an occultist, is understanding what is actually real and what is actually your projection is always a challenge. And, you know, like people say, oh, I raised so-and-so last night. I called this, you know, I spoke to that. I believe they did. But whether or not it was the entity or it was just some kind of projection is another thing. I mean, like, for example, of hallucinogenic drug called 5-MeO-DMT, and the cybernauts who were doing it, the psychonauts who were doing it, who were going into these levels of consciousness, were claiming that they were in a higher level and that they learned things, etc., etc. And when the psychologist interviewed them, the beings that they met in these realms of consciousness were the same level of intelligence as they were. So if you like, they were mind projections. And some of them were very elaborate, and some of them are very elaborate. And essentially, these people saying, oh, I spoke to this machine elf, and it told me all this stuff. And you hadn't heard it before. No, I hadn't heard it before. And then once they actually break it down, literally, the machine elf was just telling the psychonaut exactly what it understood. Although we started talking about Blavatsky, I think this is really interesting because it's what is real to us, if that makes any sense. And we're back to the Luciferian thing, where, I mean, my mother was a prime example. She would never meditate because she said the meditation was a heathen act. Yeah, so she associated the inward looking and the stilling the selves and the wanting to find the duality of nature and being. She saw that as purely heathen. Yet other people will say, oh, I went into meditation and I found myself and I'm so much better now. I'm so much calmer, blah, 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 blah. However, it's the same device, but there are two completely conflicting results. In a very strange way, we have to thank Blavatsky for that, because everything that we understand about 21st century occultism, she brought from her journeys. Without her, we wouldn't be doing a meditation. We wouldn't be even having this conversation, I promise you. If you understand how revolutionary she was she a die-hard Luciferian? And I would say definitely. Did she have the greater good also in her mind? I would say absolutely. Was she spurious? Definitely. Was she brilliant? Definitely. However, because of the time and tide, we will never completely know.
I actually struggle with her book. They just seem to get really technical. I mean, has she got a sort of starter book or something a little bit more?
No, you're kind of thrown to the lions with Blavatsky. I mean, she was incredibly intelligent. I mean, she was from Russian aristocracy. She was trained to the highest level you could possibly train, and then she had access to her grandfather's library. I mean, she was incredibly intelligent, but
that doesn't mean she needs to write sort of in a complex way like she does. I mean,
she probably thought she wasn't. Literally, education has gone downhill since Blavatsky's time and since Gurdjieff's time. There was a very interesting case. There was a few years ago, I think it was about 10 or 15 years ago, where there was massive tornadoes in the desert, and I think it was a 15th or 16th century, no, a 17th century, no, 15th or 16th century school became exposed due to the tornado, and literally it had been covered in sand in some kind of sandstorm, and there was dead people everywhere. They were still wearing the clothes, etc., etc. And they went to the school, and of course all the children were dead in the school, but they were looking at their reading materials, and these children were going to school from 5 to 14. However, during that period, they were learning, Greek, and they were learning Latin, and they were learning high mathematics between the ages of 4 and,
I just mean it's not. I don't think it's the question. I don't think I've low intelligence. I've, read other books, but she just dives straight into atoms, and so you're like, I mean, I'm interested in the occult. And suddenly I'm just reading like a chemistry lesson. Does she ever just write about, I don't know, interacting?
If you've got the time, if you have the time, then read The Secret Doctrine.
Well, can you send it to me?
I've sent it to you. I've sent it to you before. It's somewhere in your computer rotting. All right. Yeah. I sent it to you about 4 years ago. And I said, I hope you have the time to read it. But yeah, I mean,
I've got time now.
But her book, that Isis Unveiled, was literally fundamental in the formation of the idea to make the atomic bomb. And this is where it gets really interesting. Albert Einstein had a copy of it on his desk at all times. So that was really, really interesting. But I must admit, Isis Unveiled is pretty hard work, to put it bluntly. But
I'll try with The Secret Doctrine. If you send it to me, I'll try reading it again. I haven't ever found a magic book. Well, maybe Franz Barden. I like reading his stuff. William Parver and Paul. Is it a good case? Paul Case?
I don't know. I mean, I like Franz Barden. Devastating life. Yeah, he was killed in a prison, wasn't he? Because he wouldn't work for the Nazis. Oh. I don't know if you know that. Do you know that? Yeah. Hitler wanted him to work for him, and he didn't. And eventually ended up in prison, where they killed him in prison.
I didn't know he was murdered in prison.
Yeah. It was interestingly. Stowe was the guy who invented the orgone machine as well. It's a strange world, to put it bluntly.